Before we begin, let me tell you that this webinar is organized by Health O Mind. Health O Mind is a mental wellness startup based in Bangalore that aims to create awareness about mental health and well being across the nation. We at Health of Mind aim to build the world's largest holistic mental wellness platform. We attempt to provide to improve mental wellness through an integrated approach that involves aspects of different therapies such as expressive arts therapies, meditation, yoga, and mindfulness, along with more traditional therapeutic methods. We strive to build an ecosystem with a foundation comprising of capacity building, strong content management, relevant products and services to attain our objective of enabling others to overcome their mental health difficulties whilst fighting the stigma around it. And today, to talk about this very important subject, we have with us Dr. Sameer Parekh. Dr. Sameer Parekh is an eminent psychiatrist and who has played a significant role in enhancing the image and reach of mental health across the country. He completed his MBBS and MD in psychiatry from Civil Hospital Ahmedabad and topped the university in both. He is the director of development of Department of Mental Health and Behavioral Science Department, Fortis National Mental Health Program, one of the only comprehensive multi-city, multi-centric mental health care programs in the world, with a team of over 80 experts at 20 centers across Delhi NCR, Mumbai, Bengaluru, Chennai, Kolkata, Jaipur, Amritsar, Mohali, and Ludhiana. The work they have done has reached 15 crore lives. So thank you so much, Dr. Parekh, for joining us today. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. So as participants are still joining us, we'll just take a second, and I want to be sure that we're fully audible and visible. So if our attendees could just press 1 in the chat box, and we can be sure that we are. Great. Great. Thank you so much. Again, I want to remind you that you will have an opportunity to ask questions to Dr. Parekh. So please stay with us till the end and please enjoy this session. Great. So let's begin, Dr. Parekh. I was wondering if you could start by introducing the Fortis National Mental Health Program. What is it that you're working on and why is something like this important?
I think integration of mental health in healthcare is very important. And I think that's something that all healthcare providers need to focus on, which means like any other service, you have a cardiac program, you have an onco program, an orthopedic program. All healthcare providers should have a strong, well integrated mental health program from preventive to consultation liaison. The entire aspect should be there. What we've done is that since we have a presence that we have across the country, so we've created this program which is standardized, peer reviewed with peer support, and we try and provide these same quality services across all our network hospitals. But our main impetus, besides the clinical work that we do, is also A on clinical liaison, which means providing mental health programs to non-mental health fields. So we work closely in the field of psycho-oncology, trauma, grief, bereavement, chronic care. So some of these areas where the interface cardiac, where the interface of mental health with the physical health is strong. And then we have an approach to community awareness. So we run the Fortis School Mental Health Program, which is a free of cost program for schools, through which we do life skills training, teacher parent sensitizations. We run a helpline, which is in 16 Indian languages, a 24-hour helpline run by psychologists and psychiatrists who take their time out to ensure that we are able to fit in the slots in the roster and ensure that the helpline is always functional. And then we've realized that the digital space is the right space to create an outreach. So from social media to webinars, what we've done is that we've tried to destigmatize mental health, and our approach is essentially to focus upon ending the stigma, making conversations on mental health more natural. We have a young mental health advocacy program where every year we take in a batch of young mental health advocates between 15 to 21, and they work with mentors every month to be able to create awareness. Um, we get internship, we do a bit of academic work.
Mhm.
We have a sports side program, a psycho-oncology program, an art-based therapy program. We do remediation. Of course, we do the conventional therapy, psychiatric treatment, all that. Of course, we do. We work closely with the corporate sector for organizational psychology work. We've tried writing a few books, um, including a comic for children, which is Laugh and Learn on study skills. The next one's coming out soon. So that's how we've been working at various levels, and the idea is to make sure that the reach, reaches the last mile. Actually, I think
Mhm.
that's the challenge in our country, which in our own little way we are trying to work on it.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's important to understand the gamut of mental health work that you do, and especially now because it feels like throughout 2020 there has been a lot more advocacy and awareness about mental health. Considering there's been a lockdown, people are at home, and of course, mental health issues have been at the forefront. So, could you talk to us a little about that? What kind of concerns have people come to you with? What has, if you just recap on the year that's gone by, and what have you noticed that's been different?
So, yes, we've had more conversations on mental health. I think that's a fair point. But that you would have expected in a pandemic which affects almost everybody. So, something which is unprecedented, something which is sudden, which forces a significant lifestyle change, which brings in socio-economic pressures, which changes the way you look at things with the fear of getting an illness, which you see as a significant threat, which affects your social life so significantly. So when that will happen, it's like shaking your basic pillars or roots. So obviously, be it the anxiety around the illness, with the anxiety of uncertainty, with the anxiety of adjusting to this new style of living. So that has been the case. And yes, there have been more conversations. I one feel it's unfortunate that we needed a pandemic to give more focus on mental health. The mental health epidemic has been out there for years. Depression is the single largest illness in the world. 300 million people globally suffer from depression. 200 plus million people suffer from anxiety disorders. They're just two illnesses I may mention. So, one in five or individuals will have a mental health issue in their lifetime. When you look at that statistics, it's always been there. But yes, what has happened right now is that so we'll typically, though, those are three anxieties people will come with because of the uncertainty, the economic impact, and the social change, along with the a genuine fear of getting an illness. I think that's what this year has been. Although I do feel that it's the way we look at it. Um, I think by and large, people have been very responsible. I think we've been able to be, we've shown our sense of social connectedness, um, which is nice. I do feel that, like any other aspect of our life, there will always be a handful of people who will probably not be as responsible as everybody else. And the importance is that a majority people responded.
Mhm.
So if you wear a mask, if you avoid physical uh, places where there is a lot of physical gathering, you keep physical distancing, you ensure that you still continue to work, continue to be connected, continue to support. You put all of that together, you'll be able to see through this time and look back at it in a very um, positive learning experience way as well.
Sure. Do you see an increase in help seeking behavior? Have people been more proactive in approaching medical health professionals, psychologists, counselors? Do you see an improvement?
Difficult to answer that because the gradual increase has been happening in any case. As conversations become more people seek help. Second, with the acceptance and the permission around telemedicine, so telepsychiatry, telepsychology, that also allowed more people to reach. Because if you were living in an area where you did not have an expert for a few miles, you could actually just through your smartphone click talk to an expert. So that's also helped. I It's not easy to give say that this is exactly the impact of COVID, because I feel there has been an upward rise in terms of both the acceptance and help seeking behavior, but it's far, far from what it should be. And that's something we need to understand. We shouldn't allow ourselves to be swayed by the current conversations. It's still the tip of the iceberg.
Mhm. What do you mean the current conversations? What do you
As in,
think?
because we are having more conversations,
Mhm.
both in social media, digital interface, so we should allow ourselves to believe that drastic reduction of stigma has happened, drastic increase of help seeking behavior has happened. I don't think that's true. I think we'll require a lot many more years of persistent, consistent effort to stick on this path of having the right kind of conversations on mental health to be able to have a long lasting impact.
Absolutely. So at the moment, I mean, people are watching us on social media, people have joined us. What is something that you would like to tell them that would sort of go a longer way in destigmatizing mental health? And maybe they could say this to people around them and it could create like a snowball effect. So what is that one thing that you would like to say?
We say mental health. We say mental health because it's health. So if you look at health, most components that define normal health essentially are mental health. So if you have typhoid, it's not your fault. If you have diabetes, it's not your fault. If you have depression, it's not your fault. If you have bipolar, it's not your fault. For typhoid, you go to a doctor. For diabetes, you go to a doctor. For bipolar, you go to a doctor. Simple as that. That's the realization we need to have.
Mhm.
And we need to have a responsible conversation where name calling, slurs, trolling, blaming the individual, having a negativity around mental health conversations, discouraging people for help seeking, discouraging people to take medications when advised by a doctor, blaming it either on the self or the circumstances. Those kind of components need to stop. Corporate India needs to create environment where people can come and tell their supervisor, I'm taking a 5 day off because of, let's say, depression, anxiety, or something like that, and not hesitate and think that should I say a mental health issue or should I just say it's a medical problem, right? That's what needs to happen. In schools, we need to continue to focus on life skills with young people, empower them to build their resilience, bring mental health curriculum in schools, right? And if we start working with these two structured environments that we have, take mental health in primary healthcare, use digital transformation to connect primary healthcare in rural India to provide for quality, cost effective mental health services so that individuals don't have to travel in search of an expert. These are the kind of approaches that are required.
Absolutely. So, one is a societal framework that needs to change and become more accommodating and adaptive of mental health issues. What about the individual? What kind of solutions, proactive measures, recognition is important among individuals to be able to best tackle this?
Just be an advocate. Don't be a part of a conversation which is factually incorrect or undignified or insensitive. Don't be a part of it. Discourage it. Don't allow blaming to happen around you. You bring your own sense of positivity and responsibility. That's one thing. Having said that, we all need to learn to take self care seriously and build meaningful relationships. People who will come out and have come out of COVID very well, vis a vis who would struggle, the difference is going to be in their social support systems. If you have meaningful relationships, you'll be able to come through most difficult times.
Absolutely. Dr. Parekh, you were mentioning how mental health should become a part of primary healthcare. So let's talk about the role of doctors for a second. What kind of training, what kind of capacity building is required for doctors to be able to best able to tackle something like this? Because we do see a shortage among professionals, we do see a lack of information, lack of sensitivity. So what is needed?
Well, a couple of things. We need to accept the fact that we have a significant shortage, almost 800% of mental health experts in our country. For us to be able to bridge the gap, it's going to take a very long time. So only expertization of mental health is not a solution, which does not mean that you minimize or dilute their role. You understand there just aren't enough of them.
Mhm.
That's why you focus on primary healthcare. So your primary physician sh- should be able to and is able to very much treat at least some levels of mental ailments like any other ailments and would be able to be a filter as to what needs to be seen by maybe a expert who's more qualified in that particular field and what can be happening at a primary level. I think that's one thing that needs to happen. Parallel to it, like I said, we need to focus on preventive aspect of mental health as well, which is building resilience, building skills, building support systems.
Sure. So what is an ideal atmosphere like? So if I do visit a primary physician, what should I be able to talk to the person about, and how what kind of help can I seek?
No, you tell what you are feeling. Let's say it is depression. So you tell them, sign, I mean, what you are expressing. They're qualified enough to know that is this an illness or not. They may want to give you medications or they may give you some guidance. They may give you some uh, therapeutic intervention. It will not be in the conventional therapy style, but they'll be able to give you basic advice based on the severity of your problem. They can initiate the treatment and based on what happens later on they can decide, okay, you need to go to A, B or C because this would require more help or more intervention. I think that's the way. So how you would have gone to a physician and said, let's say you were having a headache and you describe your headache for the physician to realize whether it is migraine or not.
Sure, sure. And you're also talking about building resilience among catch them young is what we say in schools, trying to train people to be conscious of mental health. How does that exist in parallel? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
So the reason why I talk about schools and corporate, the reason why I do that is because these are structured environments. So you have the ability to actually do certain things because you do have people in a structure.
Mhm.
In school, you have them for 13 years. So mental health curriculum, life skills needs to be integrated with our educational system. If you work with a child for about 13 years, surely a 17, 18-year-old child who's coming from the school to a college out in the world as an adult, we could work enough that this child does not grow up into an individual who has stigma of mental health, who is not hesitant to seek help, and more importantly, who does not blame or have a negative view about mental health. At the same time, you've empowered them with the life skills to be able to deal with the day to day hassles and ups and downs of life.
Sure. Could you tell us a little more about those life skills, and maybe like some of us can start practicing them now?
So I'll tell you a program that we do. So we've written the mental health curriculum with Macmillan India, which is a 5 module training book curriculum which where we train teachers on how they can work with children. We do a very interesting program that we call as the Fortis Pro Social Peer Moderator program. Pro Social Peer Moderator. So what we do is, let's say you have 30, 40 schools coming in, 3 children per school. We train them on certain skills of application of life skill. Then these kids will then go to their school and work on this with other children, spread the message and awareness in various ways. So we do some modules. So one is on assertiveness, right, which is more on the lines of aggression management. So where you use assertiveness, communication, social skills, but we use application. So aggression management, risk behavior management, where you also talk about substance abuse, rule breaking, Then we talk on gender sensitization, which I think is very important in the society. Then we do media literacy. In today's time, you need to help children and empower them to distinguish between real and fake. You need to help them realize between the sheer intrusiveness of modern day media that's happening. So they need to be able to filter using their own mind because they can't not be there. But they need to be able to understand that if an advertisement endorsed by a celebrity is being done, they should be able to understand why that advertisement has reached them and what is the right and not right about the advertisement and not be forced to imitate.
Mm.
Then we have a study and exam skills module where we help them because everybody teaches subjects. We need to talk about how to study, how to memorize, working on your concentration, how to deal with the highs and lows of the exam. Then we added a module, I think last year or just a year before that, which is on caring for the environment using eco psychology because we do believe that young people need to become more responsible with the environment because we as adults of my generation have just made a mess of the world.
Mhm.
We've just ruined the world for the next generation. We've taken away their green, we've taken away their air, we've taken away their water, and if they don't take the reins in their hand, my generation will leave nothing for them. So we do these life skills modules. Then we have one which is a bully to buddy, which is a anti-bullying program where we create anti-bullying squads and bully-free schools. So these are some of the applications of life skill modules that we have.
Sure. And how do you imagine a program like this could be translated for adults? And considering the digital outreach programs that you were previously mentioning, some of us have not had the opportunity to learn this when we were still in school. So, what can we do for adults now?
Not an easy answer because a non-structured group does prevent the convenience of reach. It's easy to work in a structured environment like school.
Mhm.
And that's why I mentioned the corporate sector because you still have some structure where you can go through the structure and reach a wider audience at a given moment in time. And I think that's what it is. As far as adults are concerned, read a bit, be open to talk, um, follow the right pages.
Mhm.
I'm sure that there'll be more to do in life than following somebody who calls himself or herself an influencer. The word puts me off. I mean, for somebody to say that I am or this person is an influencer is starting with the premise that you'll be influenced by somebody. I mean, come on. So
Right.
follow pages which will help you.
Mhm.
Sure, for your entertainment, you can follow anybody else and do your other stuff as well. But do a division which brings quality to your life.
Absolutely. You've mentioned the corporate structured environment, and I think a lot of our participants would be wondering how can offices become more mental health friendly? What kind of steps should corporates, as you've been mentioning, should take to do that?
First and foremost, it needs to go from top. I think that's the key. It won't work where you'll have training or HR initiatives happening at the middle or base level employees. It won't work. It needs to come from top, which basically means you become a place which is mental health friendly in terms of sensitive, where people can come and talk about their mental health issues. You do even that much, that's good enough. And consistently sensitize people about early identification, early intervention, skills, communication, support system, buddy system, family life support. So you work both on preventive skill building and sensitization for early identification. You work on both components, but just make the place mental health friendly and mental health sensitive. And I've been saying this for a while that, yes, the PNL matters. Yes, the EBITDAs matters and the share prices matter. No debate around that. But how about also measuring mental health outcomes?
Mhm.
How
Absolutely.
about just one page in that several hundred page of your annual reports and annual business reviews? Well, just one page on mental health outcomes in the year for that organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we move on to questions, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of them, I also wanted to end our conversation on a happier note. So a lot of times we talk about mental health and we start to discuss the doom and gloom associated with it. But as somebody like you who's been in the field for so long, I'm sure you also look at success stories. You also look at people managing to completely be able to manage whatever issues that they were facing and lead a happy, successful life. So can you talk a little about that?
I'm I fundamentally believe that you need to enjoy life. There are no two ways to look at it. If you can't enjoy it, then there's something missing. You should do things that you like. You should do things, you invest things in you like, but at the same time, you also need to build meaningful relationships. COVID is a very good example. I think what educational institutes have done is remarkable to be able to shift from physical to digital um, education, even though we all know the efficacy was compromised, the reach could have been compromised, but we were able to sustain whatever we could have. That is inspirational. People who've managed work from home in situations where we have four people at home, all of them trying to manage their schedules and working is inspirational. I think the work done by healthcare workers is absolutely remarkable.
Mhm.
Um, it's good that at least this generation will be able to have some role models from this generation and not to have role models only who were born 50 years before they were born, and that's how I see it. And even when it comes to social media, I mean, we run the advocacy program. The first year we had a reach of, I think about, I don't remember, was it, I think 20 million or something like that. Second year it was 40 million.
Wow.
40 million the first year, and yeah, this year I think we've crossed 50 million. We've got 2 years. But what was the work? Young people who created their own awareness campaigns, reached out to people, and made an impact.
Mhm.
You have a 15-year-old making a podcast, you have a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old writing a nice blog. You have a 17-year-old talking about an awareness campaign. That's inspirational.
Mhm. Absolutely. Great. So let's take a few questions from our participants. Our first question is India prepared to support the mental health epidemic that we're likely to get into in the upcoming years?
I don't think the world is prepared. Why talk about India? I don't think the world is prepared per se. And I understand right now the challenge has been to make sure that the ICUs, the ventilators, the beds were there. And now the focus on vaccine. One understands that. But at the same time, the more conversations that we do, the more support that we develop, also at our own level in terms of families, is also a pillar of strength. Let's be very clear about it. So, is the world prepared? I don't think so. But I back the world to be able to put in the effort when the right time comes, the way the world came around in COVID. I mean, you have to look at the positive side of life.
Hmm. Absolutely. Another question is what are your views on most psychiatric illnesses getting treated with medicines only or rarely involving therapy in India? What do you think can be the reason?
Partly true and partly not true, right? First of all, giving medication for psychiatric illnesses is an absolutely fine thing to do. There is evidence based worldwide that happens, right? The negative connotation around medications needs to stop and stop immediately because any person who could have come out of a problem with the intervention of a medication should not have not taken that medication because of a certain thought process around it. That's one aspect. Uh, I don't think it's completely true about people not getting therapy. The problem is that the number is also less, and it's divided in a very skewed way. So it also depends upon whom you've been able to meet in what part of the city or the country,
Mhm.
and what kind of experts were available in that immediate geography. That also is a challenge, and that's where I've been saying that the um, digital transformation is digital India is going to make the difference because then this whole aspect of lack of availability goes through a bit of a change because at least you, if you want, you can reach digitally, and I think that's how one needs to look at it. For most psychiatric disorders, you are looking at a biopsychosocial treatment, biological when you intervene medically, psychological when you use psychotherapy for the individual, social in terms of the environmental support system. All three pillars are equally important. We don't need to give more or less value to any of these pillars.
Sure, absolutely. We have another question about as a psychiatrist, what are your thoughts on positive psychology and the mindfulness techniques that are fairly popular these days?
Positive psychology was always there. And you don't need an expert to tell you that being positive will be good, both for your life and for your health. Similarly, mindfulness in various ways has been a part of our culture in any case. Just because dialectical behavioral therapy came and also started talking about it, that does not mean that we did not understand the importance of whether it is yoga, meditation, mindfulness is very much a part of who we've been. So you don't need a psychiatrist to answer this question. It's out there as a fact that meditation, positivity, yoga, lifestyle, relationships, self care is always going to have both a preventive and a therapeutic impact for everybody.
Absolutely. We have a couple of questions about children, and one question is about how to motivate children to do things beyond the digital world in a situation where they are homebound most of the time.
Children have actually been quite fine. In a lot of forums that there are adults, they've asked me this question: How are children doing? Children are quite fine. They, it's quite fine to wake up, just open your this thing, put your camera off, and let the class go on. It's been a combination of an extended vacation and some work from home. Um, I think children are very, very resilient if you give them the opportunity. They've shown us the way. I'll give you two examples from COVID of our interface with children. We do a summer internship every year for psychology students. We thought we won't do it this year because it was more, they would come here, they would see. And, but we got messages, why is the summer internship not happening? It's just a week long internship that we do for kids. And so every year we used to do across our system probably about 3,000, 3,500, maybe plus minus. This year we did 25,000 children, summer internship. That's the power of the youth, you know. And through the internship, they said, why don't you do a course on sports side? Then we did a 3-day interaction on sports side. Then they said, we want to learn psycho-onco. We did something on psycho-onco, and something or the other kept coming out of it.
Sure,
I'll give
right.
you an example. A few years back, I was taking this workshop in Mumbai, and it's a while back actually. And we were talking about, and they were saying, how do we stay in touch, or how can we also share with you what work we do? And we said, we have this Facebook page, and this young eighth class student told me, but why are you not on Instagram? Facebook is for you guys. We are not on Instagram. So we open an Instagram page. And this year, um, I don't even, I'm very, very unaware about these things, when at my age, in any case, you forget half things. So, and then for this year, while we were doing this summer internship, this one kid told us that you must have a Snapchat account. A lot of us are there. You must make sure that there is somebody who gives us information there. I said, okay, fine, we will do something about it. And every now and then you have young people telling you something or the other to do. Um, Introduce your do's and do not. Be facilitative and not prescriptive when it comes to young people, and you will see how they'll flourish.
Hmm. But talking of young people and social media is is a big concern when it comes to mental health. There's a new term called doom scrolling, where people are just constantly spending time on social media, allowing it to affect their mental
So
health.
that's where media literacy comes in the picture. So I'm very clearly of the opinion that right from youngest years in school, going for school going children, we need to have media literacy as a component. It's not merely about the time you spend on social media, which is an issue. It's also a content issue. You have the Bandura studies which showed that aggression can be a learned response. So if you have a 8-year-old who's exposed to a video game which is very aggressive, or a television show which is very aggressive or abusive, there is evidence that the child will learn. So it may well apply on a lot of other things that are out there. With online streaming becoming very, very out there, right? Most easily accessible, the sheer concept of what is adult and what isn't is also losing its meaning, because how much of filtering you expect a parent to be able to do when the children are a lot more savvy on the net than and with the gadgets that parents are. In that context, your best case scenario is giving them media literacy skills. You won't be able to tell them don't go on social media. They will think you've come from a different planet. You tell them how well to use it. and how to integrate in their lifestyle to minimize the harm. You'll have to change our approach to as adults on social media.
Mhm.
Of course, it's a concern. There's way too much of rubbish out there. But I can't prevent children from seeing that rubbish is out there on the roads also. What all are you going to filter? You can't create wheels for the exposure that young people will have. You create empower them that their mind acts as the filter.
Mhm.
Because you won't be as able to filter everything for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have another question, and I think we're running out of time. So, I mean, I would request people to add their questions in the question answer box and not the chat box. Moving on to another question. Alternative healing therapies and techniques are seen gaining popularity with its importance even more prominent today. What are your views on it? And as a psychiatrist, would you recommend somebody to go for
Anything
it?
which is evidence based is fine. Anything which lacks evidence should be avoided.
Absolutely. And what about holistic? People talk about a holistic approach to mental health,
And
which
we have always had a holistic approach,
Mhm.
right? I'm very clearly saying the biopsychosocial approach. You can't have mental health without the holistic approach. But whatever you add in the holistic approach needs to be evidence based.
Mhm. Absolutely. Another question, which is about depression. So there is still not a lot of awareness about what depression means. How can people identify it? How can people seek help? Would you be able to unravel depression for our attendees today?
Depression is the world's single largest illness. Let's start with that fact. 300 million people globally suffer from depression. It's a medical illness. Cause biopsychosocial I've talked about. The biological component is about neurotransmitter imbalance. So, for example, in diabetes, if your insulin imbalance is causing diabetes, in depression, serotonin, as an example, is causing depression. How do you identify sadness, loss of interest, loss of pleasure, not being able to enjoy, effect on appetite, sleep, your concentration, thoughts like hopeless, helpless, worthless, not feeling that life is you are able to enjoy life or you don't feel like living. All of these things, or some of these things, causing impairment in your functions or your day to day living and crossing the 2 week mark, you are looking at depression as an illness and you should talk to any medical expert around you.
Absolutely. Great, Dr. Samipal. Thank you so much for your time. I think this has been a very, very enlightening session. You've offered us a comprehensive view into mental health issues, the way forward. How is it that as society and as individuals we can be more empowered to tackle this? So, thank you very, very much for joining us today. And we hope we can host you at another point soon.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.